experience various state budget crises, and those filter down through the monies that the state would allocate to UC and then down to UCLA. Seems like about every decade or so we have at least one, maybe two. We seem to be now in the midst of a budget crisis. The governor is proposing all kinds of cuts and so on. Could you say a little bit about how the university reacts when suddenly resources that might have been expected aren't going to materialize? What have we done in the past to deal with those situations?
Well,
how many of these did you go through? You remember?
Really serious ones.
Yeah.
3, I would say. Where cuts were, 10, 15, 120%. In a variety of ways. You have to cut costs. And we always managed here at UCLA to cut them without, I think, getting into the core of the academic program. We cut, they hurt, but we never cut faculty. We never cut the basic educational program, either research or teaching. We cut out staff. We tried never to fire, to terminate people, but to reduce the staff by attrition. We tried to raise other funds in one way or another, and tried to be more efficient in the way we did things. And there's almost always until you get down to some level, there are efficiencies that you can make that will be helpful. So it was a combination of those things.
When we've had these crises, we've tended certainly at the regental level to raise tuition fees, student fees, and that's probably going to be the case that in the current situation we're going to see more activity in that area. So if you sort of pull it all together, going back to the master plan, at the time of the master plan, students were paying relatively negligible amounts to go to UC or the other state institutions. Obviously that has changed quite a bit. There wasn't all that much in the way of private fundraising. Now that has come along to a considerable extent, as you described. There probably wasn't anywhere near the degree of dependence on federal grant funding and outside research funding and that sort of thing. So over a period of time, UC and UCLA have tended to look more like private sector institutions, the Stanfords, the Caltechs, the USCs, and so on, in terms of their resource base. Is that a direction in which we are going? People have been touting, for example, something called the Michigan model, where a state university gradually, I won't quite use the word privatized, but sort of moved in that general direction. Or the University of Virginia has been cited as another such model. Is that, if we were to look ahead 10, 15, maybe 20 years, is that where UC, or at least some of the campuses on UC, are likely to be going?
It's where we should be now. I tried to get, and as a matter of fact, I used and got so much hell for it, the word privatize, enough that I finally decided not to use that word anymore. But that's where the word, and I argued not that the university ought to move in that direction, but if the university didn't want to move in that direction, let one campus move in that direction, and let that be UCLA. If we had done it, we'd be so much better off now than we were then. Now, what does that mean? That mean, in my opinion, that would involve a number of things. One is that the relationship with the state in the funding area would be different. It would not be an appropriation. What needs to be done is that the university needs to be looked upon as at least a quasi-private institution, and an institution which serves the needs of the state. And it enters into an agreement with the state about what that is and what that's going to cost. And then you're able to enter into some kind of an arrangement. I think some way could be found to do it, where you had a 5-year rolling budget so that you knew what you were doing, and that what was given was not an appropriation. Calling it something else may not make a difference, but whatever you got, it was cash, and you used it in the way best designed to fulfill the mission that you are committed to fulfill by the agreement you have with the state. It's not at the present time. There's money for this. There's money for that. There's no fungibility, and fungibility is worth a lot.
And that means what, Chuck?
That means being able to use the money for whatever you need.
So you can
move it around.
Chancellor
right.
into those areas where you
into
think
those
you need
areas where you need it.
as opposed to where now the legislature specifies it's going to be for this,
we're in a kind of situation which Dan raised a while ago. We're there several times when I was chancellor. We had a drastic cut in our budget. We were having to
in the public budget.
Public budget.
We were getting from the
We were
state.
not able to provide raises. We were laying people off, but we were building buildings. Why? Because we had money to build buildings. We didn't have money to provide for faculty salaries or for and had the funds that for staff cut to the point we had to reduce the staff. And you know, if we could get fungibility out of the deal, we could give up a substantial amount of money. The other thing,
how would that work? In other words, what you could use the money more effectively.
More effectively.
And would need somewhat less.
Somewhat
perhaps.
less. Yeah. The other thing is on the question of student fees. The student fee issue, not just in California, but at state universities around the country, horrible in Florida, here. The politicians, for some reason, believe that low tuition is a good political device that's helpful. When I talk to them individually, they say, well, no, I don't get that from my constituents, but I just think that's a good thing. And they'll even say, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I still think it's a good thing politically. Every study that's been done indicates that the way to provide access to the university is not through low tuition. It's through a medium level tuition, and very, very strong financial aid. Because as high as it gets even, tuition is a very small part of the cost of attendance at a university. And especially if you take into account the foregone income that people who come from poorer families give up by not working while they're going to college. The families, they would be producing money for the family or whatever. So a low tuition is really not the way to provide access, as people think it is. Indeed, all you have to do is look at what's happened especially since the elimination of affirmative action, which was a disaster. But separately from affirmative action, more and more of the lower income students in this country are going to the private institutions because there they get a full ride. Here we get low tuition, but you have to pay for everything else. So and by virtue of that approach, and by virtue of the fact that while the university can set tuition, the state then, and the state has traditionally, the legislature, the governor said, oh, well, we'll buy out, we'll give you money so you don't have to raise tuition. Well, they give us money that we could raise from tuition without any harm being done whatsoever, instead of giving that money on top of what we would raise for tuition, which means the total budget is lower and the quality is therefore impaired. But that's true across the country. But here again, that's something that could be dealt with under a privatization